an elite group of soldiers is given a deadly mission. Take a remote hill in the highland jungles of Vietnam.
I could tell we were heading into an ambush.
They face a relentless enemy.
All hell broke out. Nothing was stopping them. They kept coming.
And an additional threat, deadly friendly fire.
All I could think of was if they drop another bomb in here, there'll be nobody left.
I just wanted it to end.
Which will prove the deadliest threat? The battle for Hill 875, next. November 19th, 1967. 3 companies of the 173rd Airborne Brigade are trapped on a remote hill in the highland jungles of Vietnam.
Papa 1! Papa 1! Bravo 6!
They're outnumbered and surrounded under heavy enemy fire. The soldiers are beginning to feel like they're in a death trap.
Lozada yelled at me that, Kelly, here they come.
Private Carlos Lozada mans an M60 machine gun. He's the last line of defense against an enemy that's closing in fast.
They were probably within 20 yards of us. There was definitely a lot of them out there.
And we opened up on them, and they opened up on us with grenades and RPGs and weapons. I was feeding the belt into the gun, and we were just screaming at each other and shooting these guys. They just kept coming.
It's 1967. The U.S. Army has been slugging it out with the North Vietnamese to control the Central Highlands for months. Now, American commanders are counting on the men of the 173rd Airborne to do the job. The war has been escalating for nearly a decade. More than 500,000 American troops are now in Vietnam. But the U.S. military has yet to stop communist advances, partly because of this dense forest. It protects the notorious Ho Chi Minh Trail, North Vietnam's jungle road for moving men and munitions into the south. In the last few days, large numbers of North Vietnamese troops have been spotted on a strategic hilltop near the trail, Hill 875. On Army maps, Hill 875 is so named because it is 875 meters tall, about 2,900 feet. If the NVA can be cornered here, perhaps the flow of enemy troops and arms can be slowed or stopped. The U.S. battle plan calls for 3 companies of the 2nd Battalion, 173rd Airborne, to march up the north slope of Hill 875. Company C to the right, Company D to the left, and Company A protecting the rear. As they encounter the enemy, artillery and airstrikes will be called in to wipe the enemy out. It's a routine mission, if it goes according to plan. But the North Vietnamese have plans of their own for American troops entering this dense jungle.
It was hot, humid. We had to deal with the fire ants. We had to deal with the leeches. We had to deal with spiders.
You were always in anticipation of being hit when you were traveling. And you always knew it could be you. Somebody's gonna die. This was always in the back of your mind. There was just so much vegetation, there was no way you could see the enemy. But because you were in their backyard, they were definitely watching you.
The jungle environment makes combat especially dangerous. Visibility is often no more than 10 or 20 yards. Ambush is a constant worry.
One of the things that the North Vietnamese were very, very skilled in was cover and concealment. They were so clever in digging in and camouflaging and cutting fields of fire that you would usually be well up on them before you realized it.
The 2nd Battalion of the 173rd is definitely battle-scarred. They've already lost nearly 150 men in recent jungle battles with the NVA. Now, as they approach Hill 875, some of the soldiers are wondering if they'll get out of these mountains alive. Only comradeship keeps them going, and the undying obligation to look out for each other. As they close in for the assault on Hill 875, Specialist 4th Class Ray Zaccone, Sergeant Steve Welch, and the rest of their company are marching through the jungle when they discover an abandoned NVA base camp. It's about a mile from the hill.
As we walked into that base camp, it was like walking into a football stadium. It looked like it could bivouac over 1,000 men.
There was smoke coming out of some of the fires that had been built there. So you knew that they were fresh.
There was wire laid in for communications, which is rare. There was a number of what looked to be an aid station where NVA wounded had been treated.
It's a chilling sight and a warning. The NVA is well prepared for a battle. The men of 2nd Battalion have eerie thoughts about the mission.
Everybody had a bad feeling the morning of the 19th because we knew going up that hill there was a good probability that the NVA would be up there and they would occupy the high ground.
Here's a big mountain in the middle of nowhere in the jungle. And those of us that had been in a lot of firefights, we didn't like the looks of this at all. We'd hoped that we'd had a lot more men. Before we headed up there that morning, Father Waters had a communion service, and it was very appropriate because we were all feeling kind of uneasy.
Major Charles Waters is one of the 173rd's Catholic chaplains. Waters is 40 years old and isn't required to be near the front line of combat, but he wants it no other way.
He was a wonderful man, and he would come out with the soldiers, and he was the only chaplain I ever saw out there slogging through the mud and the heat and the sweat and doing that kind of work.
Father Waters had a mass, and I decided I should go to it. Even though I'm not Catholic, I figured I needed all the help I could get because things just weren't looking that good on that hill.
After Mass, Father Waters comforts the soldiers before battle. In the background, they hear heavy artillery, and airstrikes bomb the hilltop to soften up the enemy. Now it's time to head up Hill 875. November 19th, 1967. 3 companies of the 2nd Battalion, 173rd Airborne Brigade start up Hill 875, a strategic position held by the North Vietnamese. The only sounds that can be heard are the jungle boots of some 330 paratroopers as they begin the climb. The companies move up a narrow ridge of the hill. Lieutenant Bart O'Leary is the commanding officer of Delta Company.
Unfortunately, the ridge line, the way we were proceeding, was very narrow. Didn't allow for a normal deployment of our units. There were actually 2 companies abreast. Delta Company was on the left of the ridge line. Charlie Company was on the right of the ridge line. And Alpha Company was in the rear. Plan was, if we made contact, of course, we were very close to Charlie Company. We'd link with them in the front, and then Alpha Company would form the back of the perimeter.
This is the traditional formation for frontal assault, used by the Army for decades. Unfortunately, it's a formation that's often catastrophic when used against well-entrenched North Vietnamese troops in the highlands. An advanced reconnaissance squad warns of dangers ahead.
Prior to our setting out up the hill, Recon had gone towards the top with their dog. And what the dog is, it's like an early warning system. When they smell the NVA or when they know the NVA is present, you know, they'll go to an alert. And as they passed us, they said, be careful, you know, that the dog was alerted up there at the top of the hill and that there was probably a sizable force up there.
As I went by Sergeant Wooten of the recon squad, he looked at me and he said, watch your ass, Zach, because they're going to be after you.
Sergeant Steve Welch's squad is the first to advance.
At the edge of the tree line, when I looked out, I could tell that it looked like bunkers to me. It looked to me like we were going to walk into a kill area.
You could feel their eyes on you. You know, you knew they were there. And we just couldn't see anything.
Welch immediately radios his commanding officer, Captain Harold Kaufman.
I called back to Captain Kaufman, and I asked if I could recon by fire. Recon by fire is when you bring everybody online, and then you open up. And if you get fire back, then you know that the enemy's there.
But Captain Kaufman is against the tactic. He believes it will give away his troop position.
Captain Kaufman says, no, move your men out. Steve says, no, sir. He said, you know, doesn't look right. He said, move your men out.
After the second time of asking him whether or not we could recon by fire, he said, you know, to move your men out, and I wasn't going to ask him the third time, so I really had no choice at that point. But the people around me, I could tell were scared. After 11 months of pulling point, I could tell we were heading into an ambush, and there was no way to stop it from happening.
So Welch gives the order to march forward without any advance firing. Private Quinn is the first man to move into the clearing. He doesn't get far.
We'd been in combat before, but we'd never seen anything like this. I dropped down to one knee, and I'm trying to see something. And next thing I saw to my left, the brush was just being mowed down.
The men of Charlie and Delta companies are firing blind, unable to pick out the enemy. The problem is that the NVA are well concealed in fortified bunkers that have been skillfully camouflaged.
Being a machine gunner, once the firing started, I couldn't make a move without being shot at.
It was very difficult going. Everybody that moved seemed to get hit. I still couldn't see anything as far as the enemy or where the fire was coming from, and progress sort of stalled at that time.
Pulling together the men who are still not hit, Charlie and Delta companies struggle forward, but they're in serious trouble.
Touch of one medic, he came up alongside of me and he's, Doc, get the hell out of here. I said, they got this place pegged. And it was just a matter of me turning to my left and turning to my right, and he's dead. And everybody around me is dead or wounded.
The men of 2nd Battalion try to advance 3 different times, but each time the deadly fire from the bunkers is simply too much. Just when it seems that it can't get worse, Specialist Ray Zaccone hears a sound that sends chills up his spine. A blare of bugles. It's something the North Vietnamese use to rally their troops. Worst of all, it's coming from behind the Americans.
It was something I had never heard before. And I'd been in country 8 months. And that was just another thing that reinforced the thought that we're into it big time.
This isn't what battalion commanders had expected. 2 companies are totally pinned down by fire. It's clear the enemy is moving to surround the Americans. From 5 miles away, Alpha Company's Lieutenant Matt Harrison hears radio reports from the field. He knows his men are in grave danger.
Say again, requesting artillery support.
It was understood that things were going very badly. For the NVA, it was going to be a battle of annihilation, and it became exactly that. It was 2 groups of soldiers, no quarter asked, none given, and only one was going to walk away from there. It was going to be fought until one side was annihilated.
Hill 875, South Vietnam. The mission seems simple. push the enemy off the hill and kill as many NVA as possible. But it's proving to be a very difficult and deadly operation. By noon, Charlie and Delta companies are taking horrific fire. It isn't long before large numbers of wounded are struggling to the rear, where Alpha Company is held in reserve. The enemy started with machine gun fire, but now they're lobbing mortars, rockets, and rocket-propelled grenades. Private Manuel Orona of Alpha Company is assigned to help the wounded men who are coming down the hill. It's a difficult task with gunfire raining down on them.
Not only the point, but all over the perimeter, we started getting wounded from snipers, from B-40 rockets, from RPGs. The wounded were just coming from everywhere.
By early afternoon, Captain Michael Kiley, commander of Alpha Company, realizes something must be done to get the growing number of casualties off the hill. It's impossible to land helicopters in the dense jungle. Kiley calls for axes, machetes, and chainsaws to be dropped in. He takes a platoon and begins to hack out a crude landing zone at the base of the hill. As work gets underway, Kiley fears that the NVA are now infiltrating below his position and could attack the men working to clear the landing zone. Kiley calls for a squad to come down and protect the rear.
Myself, my machine gunner, Carlos Lozada, John Steer, who assisted the machine gunner, and another guy, went back down the trail to set up the observation post.
The four men move some 50 yards below Kiley and his troops, where they hope to provide an early warning if the enemy attacks. But as the soldiers reach their position, one of the men panics.
Not good, man.
He screams that the position is suicidal and runs back up the hill.
When this other guy left, it was just maybe seconds after that when Lozada yelled at me that, Kelly, here they come. I don't have a clue how long they had been creeping up. I know that they had a lot of them.
We opened up on them, and they opened up on us with grenades and RPGs and weapons. And Carlos and I were screaming at each other, though we were only inches from each other, because I was feeding the belt into the gun. And we were just screaming at each other and shooting these guys, and they just kept coming.
The first thing I did is I flipped out a couple hand grenades at them, just to kind of get their attention, or to stop them as much as I could. And then, of course, I started firing my M16.
The three Americans, John Steer, James Kelly, and Carlos Lozada, are now the last line of defense, protecting Alpha Company, and perhaps the entire battalion, from being overwhelmed.
Kelly is off on my right flank shooting at the enemy. And so I drop back, I cross the trail while Carlos is making a sweeping burst.
Ignoring the bullets whizzing around him, Lozada fires at the approaching NVA while slowly backing up the trail.
And then all of a sudden I heard the machine gun stop firing. And I thought, well, they're just reloading. No, this is not a problem. And then it didn't start again.
Then suddenly, a shot from an AK-47 slams through John Steer's neck and shoulder.
I grabbed Carlos and I hollered, I'm hit. But when I grabbed Carlos, he was slammed into me. And I don't know, I think it was like the same burst that got him and hit him in the head. Well, he come flying across the top of me, and I guess I about went nuts.
Well, Steer was screaming, and so I left my position to go over and see what had happened. And once I got over to where they were, I realized that Lozada was dead. I remember grabbing a couple hand grenades, throwing a couple more out, and grabbing Steer, and basically pushing him back up towards the A Company, screaming, hollering at him to move, move, move.
And he starts dropping grenades behind us. And that's what, I guess, well, that's what saved our life.
Steer and Kelly run for their lives. Now, the advancing NVA threaten to swarm over Mike Kiley's men, who've been hacking out the landing zone. Kiley frantically radios for help.
Kiley calls me and says, bring as many men as you can bring down here to help us. We're about to be overrun. So I took approximately half of the men I could get my hands on in my platoon and just headed down toward the LZ that they were working on.
Tom Remington and his men rush down the hill and try to come to Kiley's rescue. But they run head-on into the NVA, who are now pouring up the hill.
Looked like you were shooting right through them. Nothing was stopping them. They kept coming. They kept coming.
I know I had a bad shrapnel wound in my leg, and then a few seconds later, I was shot in the shoulder. But all of a sudden, 8, 9, 10 men with me. I think maybe 5 are dead, and all the other 5 are wounded. So, I mean, we never got to Captain Kiley.
Completely outnumbered, Kiley and 5 of his company struggle to hold off the inevitable. But they are overrun and shot at point-blank range. Nearby, the wounded men waiting to be evacuated are also killed. Several hundred yards away, Lieutenant Remington is scrambling to save what's left of his command. He screams for his men to pull back and join with Delta and Charlie companies farther up the hill. If Alpha Company can regroup with the others, perhaps they can organize a defensive perimeter and survive.
Every soldier up there was scared to death that we were going to be overrun because there was casualties galore below us, above us, and amongst us everywhere. It's a strange thing. I had a serious leg wound, a serious shoulder wound, and yet I didn't really feel a lot of pain.
Remington orders his men to dig foxholes, but because they abandoned their rucksacks when they came under fire, they don't have the right tools to dig with. They're forced to use anything handy.
The men, for once, they didn't hesitate to dig. They would get out their bayonets, their steel helmets, anything they could find and dig, because they knew the NVA were all around us, and they knew they didn't want to be above ground if the NVA were coming at us.
I think it was obvious to all of the soldiers there very quickly that they were fighting for their lives. Mike Kiley knew, Carlos Lozada knew, Tom Remington knew that if they were not successful in holding what they had, that the entire unit was going to be overrun and destroyed.
The battle has been raging for less than 6 hours. Few Americans on Hill 875 believe they'll get off this mountain alive. The men on Hill 875 are running low on ammunition, food, and water. They also have many wounded in desperate need of air evacuation. But the North Vietnamese surround them, and a deadly curtain of fire is making it impossible for rescue helicopters to land. 6 choppers are badly damaged or shot down trying to get to the threatened soldiers. Lieutenant Matt Harrison is some 5 miles from the action on the hill. He's been listening to the desperate radio transmissions as his Alpha Company gets decimated. His friend and commanding officer, Mike Kiley, has been killed.
Once I could no longer hear Mike Kiley on the command net, I knew that he was not functional because I knew Mike Kiley, and he was a great soldier.
By late afternoon of November 19th, the 3 companies of the 2nd Battalion are surrounded on the hill. The men dig what cover they can and await the final attack.
Everybody had individual foxholes. So we'd dig, and then when a sniper sniped, we'd stop and shoot. But everybody at that particular time was very concerned about getting as far underground as possible.
2nd Battalion manages to organize a line of defense, but they have little hope that it will protect them against a direct attack by the North Vietnamese. In the meantime, they can only call in artillery and airstrikes to keep the NVA off balance. Unfortunately, the artillery strikes have little effect on the North Vietnamese bunkers. Heavy logs and a thick covering of earth on top of the bunkers makes them impervious to anything but a direct bomb or artillery hit. As the bombardment ends, the NVA retaliates with mortar and rocket fire, hand grenades, and machine guns.
I was between two riflemen, and I had looked to one side, and I saw the right eye explode in the guy's head as the bullet went through it. And then when I looked to my right, the other guy caught one in the forehead, and he flopped down, and he died.
Through all the fire, Father Charles Waters calmly moves among the men as if he's making house calls on a Sunday afternoon. He is oblivious to his own safety. One moment, he's carrying a wounded man to safety under heavy fire. The next, he's giving last rites to a dying trooper.
During the afternoon, as water became shorter and shorter, Father Waters came up to me, and he had his mass kit there, and he took out the two little plastic bottles. One was filled with holy water, and the other one was filled with wine. And he said, "Bart, can you use this?" And I said, "Chaplain, please give it to the medics. The medics will be able to use it. Even the wine," I said, "that'll be welcome to some of the guys."
For Ray Zaccone, the chaplain's presence in the midst of such carnage somehow provides comfort.
He didn't have to be there, but he wanted to be with his boys. There was a time where I happened to be looking right at Father Waters, and he had a wounded guy in his lap, and he was giving him his last rites. And it just so happens that the sun happened to be shining right down through the trees, and he smiled at me. It was like this reassuring smile. His way of giving me some encouragement. It was just by the look on his face. And he was quite a man, he really was.
As darkness falls, the devastating fire from the NVA begins to let up. For some reason, the North Vietnamese do not pursue their tactical advantage. For the men of 2nd Battalion, who expect to be swarmed over at any moment, it's a mystery.
I'll never, ever know why they didn't keep coming. We had a lot of wounded, a lot of dead. I don't know why they didn't attack us.
For the moment, the Americans can only hunker down and defend themselves as best they can. On the radio, they learn that one more U.S. airstrike is coming in. In the gathering darkness, a Marine fighter bomber dives toward Hill 875. The exhausted troops hope it will be a successful strike and give them some breathing room. But their day is about to get a whole lot worse. A Marine fighter pilot is diving toward Hill 875 in the twilight of November 19th. He plans to drop his final 500-pound bombs to aid the 2nd Battalion paratroopers pinned down on the ground. The air controller tells him to drop where he can see napalm burning at the top of the hill. Perhaps confused by a friendly illumination flare, the pilot approaches on the wrong course. Ray Zaccone is returning to his foxhole when he hears the jet.
I just got back in that hole when I heard the jet come in. All day long, jets were making their bombing runs from east to west, across the ridge. And this one was coming in with the ridge, like north to south.
We were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, the aircraft made his run right up the ridgeline. And I looked up and I said, "What is he doing?"
The pilot is making his run from directly behind the men of 2nd Battalion, on a course aimed right at them.
I remember looking behind me and seeing the bomb leave the jet. I could see the jet, I could see the bomb leaving the jet, and the bomb looked like it was coming right at me, and I thought to myself, oh, shit.
Manuel Arona is digging a foxhole with another soldier when the jet roars overhead.
I remember I went down for a scoop of dirt, and then that's when the bomb hit.
There was a guy in the hole with me. I threw him in, and I piled on top of him, made sure I got my head below ground, and the bomb exploded.
That bomb lands directly in the center of the 2nd Battalion's perimeter. Captain Harold Kaufman is obliterated. Father Charles Waters and all the wounded he is tending vanish in an instant.
The man that I was in the position with, half of his body was gone. And then when I was looking up, I could see the body parts on the trees, on the limbs. And I shook myself out of it. I got up, and it was so quiet.
It was really eerie quiet for about 10, 15 seconds. And then all of a sudden, the guys behind me who were above ground started screaming and yelling, calling for their mother. You know, my legs are gone. Mom, Mom. And it was bad. It was bad.
John Steer, although gravely wounded, is still alive.
Blood was coming out of my mouth, and my nose, and my ears, and I noticed my right arm was gone because I went to pick it up, and it was just hanging by some tissue and some sinews on the inside here. I remember I cried out then, "God, don't let me go to hell." And I knew I was dying.
Bart O'Leary is knocked unconscious. When he comes to, no one around him is recognizable.
Down the hill from me to my left was the area where the medics had all the wounded. And there were approximately 35 guys there. You couldn't identify any person or bodies that were there.
The bomb carves a crater big enough to bury a dump truck. Flame and steel rip across the perimeter, killing 42 men and wounding 45. It's the worst friendly fire incident of the Vietnam War. Tom Remington fears that other bombs may be on the way.
All I could think of was if they drop another bomb in here, there'll be nobody left. So I began to search for a radio. I finally found a radio. So I called back to Fire Support Base 16. I talked to a lieutenant there, and I told him, stop those airplanes. Don't let them drop another bomb. They're killing us up here.
As darkness closes in to obscure the horror of the bomb, the survivors spread out to reform the defensive perimeter. Military organization is all but gone. The men simply do the best they can. Everyone still expects an NVA night attack.
It was a long night. It seemed like every minute was an hour or longer.
That night was absolutely hell on earth. I mean, it was just desolate up there, scary. The smell, the soldiers said it was just death in the air.
Their situation was precarious enough before the bomb. Charlie and Delta companies are severely battered, and Alpha is virtually wiped out. There are few officers left. Lieutenant Tom Remington is lucky to be alive and tries to keep his men's spirits up.
I had more shrapnel in the left leg and left arm from the bomb, and my eardrums were gone. I mean, I just pretty much tried to encourage the men to hang in there and keep their positions manned. I said, help will be here tomorrow. I didn't know the help would be here tomorrow, but I told them that.
Remington has no idea if help will come. All he can do is push the beleaguered airborne fighters to just stay alive one more night. A third of the men in the 3 companies of 2nd Battalion have been killed or wounded, many from a bomb dropped by their own side.
Guys in the foxhole were there in the quiet, in the dark, and many of them had wounded or dead soldiers next to them. Not a good night to be alone.
4 miles away, Company B of 4th Battalion is ready to move out, but they must wait until first light. Meanwhile, the men on Hill 875 have no idea that help is on the way. All they can do is comfort the dying. Tom Remington finds one of his men with both feet blown off.
He was alive. And all I could do was try to comfort him. I had no way to medicate him or do anything. So I held his head in my lap, and he bled to death. And it was horrible. But, you know, I had to move on, and I had to make the men that were still alive get back in position and maintain a perimeter.
Rebuilding the perimeter comes just in time. The NVA are quick to take advantage of the darkness. Manuel Arona is trying to help the wounded when he hears a strange sound.
I remember hearing whistles at this time, a couple of real sharp whistles, and I had heard them before, but I never paid attention to them. And then somebody else, they're coming.
RPGs illuminate the night. AK-47s flash in the jungle foliage. Suddenly, NVA troops make their move.
When the flares, you could hear them pop, and the NVA would get down until the illumination was out, and then they'll come back up again.
The NVA were screaming, the people behind us were screaming. And it just got to the point where I'd seen so much in 11 months that I just wanted it all to end. And I just thought to myself, I just hope my parents know that I went down fighting.
But the North Vietnamese attack is not coordinated. They concentrate on just one part of the line.
I remember saying to myself that I wonder how long this is going to keep up, because we won't last much longer. And all of a sudden, it just stopped.
The NVA do not attack again. The jungle remains silent except for the moans of the wounded. The dawn of a new day reveals the reality of what has happened on Hill 875. 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne has effectively been destroyed as a fighting force.
Early on the 20th, the morning after the bomb drop, at first light, you could finally see the bomb crater and the full extent of the damage that bomb did, and the number of bodies and wounded, and it was just unbelievable.
American artillery and airstrikes resume, but they can do nothing to help the men of 2nd Battalion. By all rights, this unit should have been pulled back. Those who are still alive are in no shape to fight off another major attack or even fight their way to safety.
We weren't going anywhere. So the only relief we could get would be for somebody to come out and reinforce us.
Their only hope of surviving is the 4th Battalion, which is doing its best to get there. A barrage of artillery shells is fired ahead of the moving infantry. The tactic finally breaks the NVA line at the base of the slope. Hill 875 is no longer surrounded. Throughout the morning, the NVA continue to pour rocket and mortar fire on the wounded and suffering Americans. But by afternoon, the North Vietnamese stop firing. And 4th Battalion finally arrives. The battered, exhausted men hope their ordeal is over.
Word was passed not to shoot at them coming up the ridge, that they were near. There was no cheering when the 4th Battalion came in, but there was certainly an upward lifting of spirits.
It was unbelievable to see new faces, to see fresh faces, to see the water. The first thing anybody wanted was the water.
They brought water, they brought ammunition, and they brought bodies that were able to fill in the positions and give us a great amount of relief.
Not long after 4th Battalion arrives, Alpha Company Executive Officer Matt Harrison, who's been back at field headquarters, is finally able to get in by helicopter and rejoin his men. He knows the situation is bad, but he isn't prepared for what he finds.
It was like stepping into the third circle of hell.
As Harrison moves through the wreckage that had once been his command, he can identify only 25 of the more than 125 men who started out with Alpha Company. He comes upon Tom Remington.
I recall encountering Tom fairly soon after I got there. My recollection is he had dried, crusted blood on the sides of his face where he had bled from the ears. Obviously, filthy, exhausted.
He spoke to me, and I asked him for water. Did he have any? And he said, sure, and called me Tommy, and he gave me water.
The men from 4th Battalion take over defensive positions on the perimeter. The battered soldiers they replace hobble or are carried to the rear. Down the trail, Carlos Lozada gave his life to defend. Lozada will receive the Congressional Medal of Honor for his heroism. Father Charles Waters will also receive the Medal of Honor. In total, more than 150 men of the 173rd Airborne give their lives to hold on to what they had captured. Over 400 are wounded. Helicopters are finally able to get into the landing zone that was paid for with the lives of Captain Kiley and his men. Gradually, the worst of the wounded are airlifted out. Yet the fight for Hill 875 is far from over. For 3 more days, the men of 4th Battalion and a few members of the 2nd will fight more bloody battles to push back the NVA. Finally, on Thanksgiving Day, 1967, the top of Hill 875 is taken. After so much bloodshed and death, the North Vietnamese have quietly abandoned their bunkers and escaped into neighboring Cambodia. Other than a few shouts of victory, there is little celebration to mark the taking of the prize that required such sacrifice.
My thoughts and reflections of 39 years ago on Hill 875 are of all the men who died and were maimed up there for no particular good reason other than going up a hill. I mean, once the hill was taken, it was given right back to the NVA. That doesn't diminish in any way the bravery, the valor, the gallantry, the sacrifice of the men that went up there.
I think everybody that I was on that hill with me, I feel an attachment to. I mean, we survived some of the worst fighting in Vietnam.
I'm sorry that I couldn't tell the guys I loved them back then, but I did. I was willing to die for them. Back then, I treated the guys so mean because I wanted to keep them alive, and I didn't want to hurt when they died because so many of them died. But I loved them.
A day doesn't go by without me thinking about them one way or another. I owe my life to those people, to the caliber of men that I was with. I would not be here today if it weren't for them. I feel I owe it to them to tell their story.